G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. Today we are talking about defenders, specifically the premium defenders that we think are value this year that you should be considering starting your team with. Let's go!
She's done it from nowhere. Hoisted the goal from inside the centre. Sheed from the boundary. Dusty. Petty. Petrarca. Oh, wow. How good is that? The legend becomes immortal.
G'day and again welcome to the AFL Fantasy Podcast by the Ball Boys. My name is Mitch Casey, I am your host and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy and joined once again by Luke Rogerson. How are you, man?
Yeah, good mate. You can find me on Twitter at LukeRojo17.
How are those Twitter followers going over there?
Mate, we're slowly going up. I think we might be like mid-30s now. But
Here you go. All right.
Congratulations to you, actually. You've been followed by 1/3 of the traders.
Yeah. Well, welcome along, Warnie. If you're listening along, mate, good to have you on board. And a few of the other AFL fantasy notables out there reaching out to us, which has been very nice. Very good to see that the community's embraced us so far.
Yeah, something that I wanted to mention to lead off the show was that it's just been such an awesome community. I think what all fantasy coaches want out of their content is just different opinions.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether your opinion's different to someone else's. That's all good. It's just all information to then use to pick your team. So everyone's been really supportive so far. Warnie hasn't followed me as yet. I think.
Warnie, what's going on, man?
Stitch up. I think he must have had a look. He goes, 35 followers. That's not for me. So, but if anyone can pull some strings and get the Warn Dog on board, it would just make my year.
Maybe we're gonna get you to a certain benchmark, and then that's when you'll be worthy. So let's pump Luke up with some Twitter followers. So if you're listening along and you haven't followed Luke Rojo17 on Twitter, we'd definitely encourage you to do so. He's got some good ideas, he's got some good stats out there that's been it's been floating around. So, but yes, again, welcome to the show, guys. Third podcast of the new Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. Today we are starting to get into the nitty and gritty. I'm very excited actually to talk today. We're talking lots of player specific things. Yeah. So far it's been very general. But now we get to throw out some hot takes out there and
that's it.
Put the money where our mouth is.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can't see it, but Mitch is pitching a tent under the table here because we're going to talk stats, and Mitch absolutely loves stats. So it's going to be a good one. Okay.
Yeah, let's. So maybe we shouldn't waffle around because I reckon I can go for a little while on some of these blokes. So
okay, mate, lead us off.
Let's get stuck straight into it. We're talking underpriced premiums in the defenders category.
So define premiums for us.
Yeah, so premiums, we've kind of just drawn a line in the sand. We're considering players who are priced at 85 or above for the defenders. So for me, this was kind of around the range that if you're picking a player around this price range, you want them to be season-long picks. These guys are not stepping stones. You want these guys, if you're picking them for the reason that you think that they have a chance to be best six or close enough to, and they're going to stay in your team for the whole season.
Spot on.
85 was our sort of price tag there. So I think the lowest ranked player that we were considering was Mason Redman. But anyone there and above, we're considering for this list. So to start us off, underpriced premiums, I'm going to start us off with Angus Brayshaw, who I think is an underpriced premium defender this year. I think that there's a couple of reasons I believe he is. The first and foremost, I think that he presents himself as value this year, even though he's priced at 99. I think what's his actual price? He is, I've just drew off to my bundle here. Angus Brayshaw, 878,000, priced at 99.2. I think he's value because we saw at the very end of last year him move into that midfield role, and I think that from what I can tell, that's what Melbourne want him to do, at least early in the season so far. I think that's where he's going to pick up where he left off last year, and I think in that role he can push that price into the hundreds. And I actually have him going as the second highest defender this season, behind a Sam Doherty. I think he can be the number 2 ranked defender.
High praise.
What are your thoughts on?
Look, I had
Brayshaw?
Brayshaw highlighted as one of my undervalued guys as well. So we're off to a good start. We've got a match.
Good.
That's obviously the consideration with him, isn't it? It's where he plays. I think you look at him valued at 99, and you say he plays in Melbourne's midfield. he's value.
Yep.
He's going to score more than 99. He's going to average more than 99. So is there a world where he gets put back to a halfback flank or, God forbid, put out to a wing? And would you still see him as value if he was in those roles? Or
the wing is the role that concerns me.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
We've seen him play well on that halfback when Salem was out for much of the season, and he picked up and played really well in that role. I still think that the CBA inside midfield position is where he will shine the best, and I think that's where he's going to have his highest ceiling. But considering he's averaged 99 for the season last year, he only went into the midfield for the last...
Well, I've got here his last 6 games of the year, he averaged 60% CBAs.
Yeah,
so
and a couple of those were finals games as well. So in terms of the AFL Fantasy and the regular season, only 4 of those games actually count towards his average. So when you look at that 99 price tag, it's only taken into account 4 games inside the CBAs.
So is that something, Mitch, straight away that you're bullish on, or is that something that you're going to be keeping an eye on Melbourne throughout the preseason, or what are your thoughts there?
I'm keeping my eye on Melbourne in the preseason. I'm very bullish on it right now because I think they liked what they saw. I also think you can tell that you can see why it happened with with Salem coming back into the team. It also moved Petrarca into playing a bit more of that mid-forward split. You can look at, if you look at his midfield sort of role in conjunction with Petrarca's, they're very much correlated. As Petrarca went down, Brayshaw's minutes in the centre went up. So you can see in round 23, Christian Petrarca had a CBA of 34%, his season low, and that corresponded with Brayshaw's season high in CBAs in 76. I think that's what they want to do a little bit more of. They want Petrarca being that Dustin Martin, Jordan De Goey kind of type, and I think that that is good for someone like a Brayshaw.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And just from a tactical perspective, like you said, if you've got a Petrarca in your team, you don't want him playing on the ball the whole time. You want him going forward. You want him kicking goals. So for me, not to diminish Brayshaw as a football player, because he's an elite footy player, but he can be like a little bit of a Mr. Fix-It in there. He can kind of cover those Olivers and Petrarcas as they go forward from a stoppage. He's going to be able to lock it down. He's an elite tackler, and he's just like a smart footy player. So I do see his role in the midfield this year. Fingers crossed Simon Goodwin sees the same.
Yeah, I mean, he's a really good player, and the thing about Melbourne as well, they run a really tight midfield, and they have for the last couple of seasons. They are also getting elite service. You've got someone like Brody Grundy coming into the mix to give them better service from a ruckman, Max Gawn. You're getting Grundy and Max Gawn as your ruckman 100% of the game. So
if I'm a Melbourne midfielder, I'm pretty happy.
You're licking your lips, right?
And
the other thing, he's never getting tagged. Like, you're not tagging him over an Oliver or a Petrarca.
That's true.
He's just going to roam free, do his things, collect easy marks. He had a game where he had 20 marks in the one game. That was in a half back role, but he has the ability to find space and get those easy +6s.
He's versatile. Even if he's thrown back there for parts of a game, you don't go, oh shit, he's back, he's not going to score. Like, he's still capable. So I'll put you on the spot. Is he your D1? Are you going to be picking him D1?
At the moment, he's listed as my D1 defender. I think that I've got him in that 105 to 110 range. I think he does present really good upside. I know that the halfback role is in vogue right now. Players like Jaden Short, didn't do well when moved into the midfield, but I think that Brayshaw is a different beast. We're also not too far removed from players like Callum Mills, Rory Laird, who were defenders back in their day, going to the midfield and really exploding. Now they're considered premiums in their own midfield line. I think that Brayshaw does have that potential as well, and those are really the season-winning picks that you can make, that even though they're of a high price tag, I still think that he has the potential to be number 2 or maybe even the number 1 ranked defender when seasons come. And I think, last 5 average, he averaged 110 points. That also includes a couple of games where he wasn't in the midfield. Averaged 60% of CBAs once he made that switch in round 20. And then if you take away just those games, average 106 in those 4 games as well. So I think that it's not a huge amount of upside, but when you're talking about those high-end guys that are like the top 6, top 2 in their line, any bit of value I think is important. And in a line like the defenders where there's there's not huge obvious picks, I think that's enough value for me to select him over some of those other guys around the price tag.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And you can fall, I think, into a trap of just thinking, I've got to pick value. I've got to pick lots and lots of value. But you could end up, if you go down that road, you could end up with a team where you don't have any guys that you're really happy with to score your big points. So here's hoping you're right, Mitch, and we'll have our fingers crossed for a big Brayshaw season, hey?
Yeah. What so I've put a number on, I've got him projected to do 105 is sort of my projection. I think that's fairly conservative. He could be as high as 110 in my opinion. What would you, if you had to, I'll put you on the spot again.
No, that's all right. Yeah, look, I don't see him going less than 99.
Yeah.
So for me, he's not going less than 99. It's going to be somewhere, I think, between 100 and 105, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
But there is that little caveat that it is dependent on role. So, with a lot of these guys, we'll talk about it. A lot of it is dependent on role, but we'll see. My turn?
Yeah. Return serve over to you, mate.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it. Now, this fella is somewhat of a polarising figure in fantasy. He has the potential to go really high, but he has some potential for disaster as well. Now, also, interestingly, Mitch actually won't be able to pick this guy as of the 15th of March because he's going to have a birthday that takes him over 30.
Okay, because he's the rule.
So I'm interested to see Mitch's thoughts on this one. But this bloke is Tom Stewart. And some people might think, hey, this guy's not undervalued, but I want to just give you a couple of stats to just have a little bit of a think about. So he is averaged at just over 90. I think it's 91. Okay. Now, this is a man that in the 9 games leading up to his suspension, he had that big 4-game suspension this year. So in the 9 games leading up to his suspension, guess what he averaged, Mitch?
Oh, it was something ridiculous. It was like 106.
He's averaged 110.
Jeez.
In those 9 games leading up.
Yep.
Okay. And that included scores of 169 and 157. Okay. So this is
the third highest score in fantasy, I believe, the 169 game.
This is a guy that can go big.
Yeah.
Okay.
Big silly.
So to me, I look at a season like that and I think, okay, so he's in the 9 games, which is a fair span. He's averaged 110. He's been suspended for 4 weeks, and then he's come back. He's trying to find his feet again in the team, in a team that's making a campaign at finals. Okay. Yep. But normally you'd say guys coming off a grand final, maybe they're not going to be hungry. Maybe they're not going to, be out looking to prove themselves.
Yep.
I think he's going to have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder next year. I think he's going to be thinking, hey, I missed a fair chunk of the season with a bit of an undisciplined act. I think he's going to be coming out to prove himself a little bit as well. So most people probably know this, but he plays high time on ground. He's normally around the 90% mark, even higher sometimes. But for me, 90 is unders.
What's he priced at? So if we
priced
have
at 91.
Price at 91.
Price at 91.
836,000. Actually, I've got him here at price at 94.5, so I might have to fact check that. Yeah, yep, but 836,000 again. Still waiting for that bloody game to open. So,
yeah, I know.
So some of these things might be a bit off, but yeah, I think he was on my list. Let's say that.
So he's at least on your list. So we're not like way off each other.
I wasn't completely cutting him off. He is edging that line of that over 30s rule.
If you pick him, I'm going to be India, mate, because he turns 30 on the 15th of March, and if you pick him after that, then...
I know these rules, they're guidelines.
Oh, are they? Yeah, he's backing out, people. He's backing out.
I might have said rules, philosophies. I don't know, guidelines. Let's use that. But look, the thing that really intrigues me about him, and we had this conversation a bit off air the other day. Coming from you're obviously last year was your first year playing AFL Fantasy. You come in, you see this Tom Stewart bloke coming in, put in 169 points. I think another game where he had 140 or 150. He was always known as that guy prior to last season that was really, really consistent, really high floor, but never had a ceiling. I think his highest, I just had a quick look just now, but his highest game before last season was 124. So not something you consider like uber premium level type ceiling. But obviously that was proven wrong last year, and he was, had his best season at age 29, pretty much you could say. He also had an injury-affected game where I think he was on track for a really big score, got injured at 44 in round 12 against the Bulldogs, and then obviously had the bye the week after, so he didn't miss any actual time. But if you take that score out, he's averaging 97.5.
Yep.
So right there's at least 3.5 points of upside. And with a ceiling of 169, he could easily come out and distance himself from the rest in the early parts of the season. Is that enough upside? Is the question, I suppose, that I'll throw back to you. If he's priced at 94, do we want him to go like 100 plus?
I think he can go 100 plus. I mean, I say he can go 100 plus. There's heaps of guys that can go 100 plus.
Can.
I think he will go close to 100 plus if he has an uninterrupted season.
That would mean that he's playing the best season he's ever had. So are we coming out and predicting that he's going to do that at age 30? That's my question.
That 9-game stretch last year gave me... I was a little bit unsure, and then I went back and I had a look, and I thought, this guy's proven over 9 games midway through a season, right before he's then been suspended for an undisciplined act, where he's gone big. So I think he's capable there, and he's definitely... Am I saying I'm going to pick him in the team straight away? Hey, not sure. Yeah. But will I be watching him very closely? Yeah, I will be.
I personally think that he's value, but I don't think he's enough value, is about where I'm considering Tom Stewart. I think there's just maybe better options.
Yep.
I think also when you consider the slight change in Geelong's game style, a couple of years ago they were really chipping the ball around a little bit more.
Mark dominant.
Very mark dominant. They're a bit more direct right now. It didn't really seem to affect him last year, but there is just that chance with the randomness of scores and game, sort of the game script, if you will, can sometimes maybe negatively affect this guy. A couple of times I remember last season watching him, he might have got stuck on the bench when they were doing those little chip-to-chip marks to finish out quarters.
Isn't that the worst to watch?
Don't you hate that?
Yeah.
So, and sometimes he's on there and he's getting the benefit of that. So, and that's also, I don't love having my players rely on those kind of game script narratives for their scores to really fly. A player like Mitch Duncan was another player like that who we might talk about later, but he was, I think there was that one game where he racked up 50 points in the last 5 or 6 minutes of jump time.
There's another guy I want to talk about that does that occasionally as well.
Tom Stewart is a bit like that. So if I can avoid going for a player like that, I will, and go for those CBA type defenders like an Angus Brayshaw that can do it in the flow of any type of game. Yep. Those are my thoughts with Tom Stewart, and and the 30 rule. I don't know.
We'll be keeping a close eye on what you do, Mitch.
Do you think he's knocking on the door of your team at the moment, or?
I think there's guys on this list that I'm more interested in, and I actually skipped over a guy on my list that is valued higher, I believe. To have a bit of a chat about Tom, but we'll see if this other fella comes up as well. So there's probably 3 or 4 guys on this list that I've got here that I'll genuinely consider, and it'll come down to what we have a look at in the preseason and how many times I change that team.
Yeah, let's move on to the next one.
Let's do it. Who you got?
I'm interested to see if you've got this guy on your list because I'm pretty hot on him, and his name is Isaac Cumming. Now,
could you say he's coming into your team?
Anyway,
I'll show myself out.
I shouldn't have given
someone's got
of a laugh.
Someone's got to do the funny stuff.
Oh, jeez. Anyway, before we'll move on from that, but price at 90.6 or 91 if you round up, 802,000. He's 24 years old, so on the other spectrum of the age, he is someone who last couple of seasons has put up some good averages, and I wanted to, I was diving into sort of see how he went when Himmelberg was playing in the forwards versus when he was playing with Himmelberg in the backs, and how that affected him. And I thought there'd be a bigger difference. There actually wasn't too much of a difference. He averaged 92 in the first sort of part of the season before Himmelberg moved back to defence, and then 90 when Himmelberg was in there. So only a 2-point difference. And when you're priced at 91, obviously that splits the middle. So couldn't really find a distinct thing there. The only thing I did find is that the ceiling, or the floor, I should say, was decently lower when Himmelberg was in there.
Yeah, okay.
So he had a couple of scores in the 60s. I think his lowest score was 60.
I think it was 60,
whereas he never dipped below 70 before Himmelberg moved to defence. So the early reports so far is Himmelberg is going to be training with the forwards and playing a bit more up the ground.
Yeah.
So I think that leaves Cumming as sort of the designated player off half back, and we know in those systems, if we are to believe that the coach coming over is going to implement a bit more of that fast-paced direct footy, we've seen in those Richmond game styles, the Collingwood game styles, the Daicos, Basher Hoolies, the Jaden Shorts, those are the players that Tom Stewart, if we're talking about Geelong, those are the players that can still thrive.
Yeah.
And if he's out and out, sort of questionably the guy back there with Himmelberg up forward, then I still think he has a bit of upside. And being as young as he is, I think that he does still present a little bit of upside. Again, like a Tom Stewart, I don't know if it's enough, but it is someone that I am still watching, and I still think he will improve going. So
it'd be very much dependent on what you see in the preseason with him as well.
Yeah. I think it's we're talking about undervalued players. He will be. I don't think he'll be very highly owned. I think he'll be at a bit of a point of difference if you are really interested in doing something like that. But I also think that. Whilst there is value, as the question is there enough value? And I don't necessarily think he's going to be pushing like the 100 mark or anything like that, but mid-90s, I could definitely see him do.
I mean, he took 129 kick-outs last year, or kick-ins, and played on 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Like to see him play on 100% of the time. But that's positive as well. Next best was Himmelberg with 56. So I guess that kind of influences that as well. As if we see Himmelberg going down back, then he's another potential to steal kickouts from him. So as much as people might say, kickouts, what difference do they make? If a bloke has 5 kickouts game and he leaves a square,
there's 15 points.
Hey, happy days. I'll take 15 points.
Yeah, 100%. So an extra 1 or 2 a game, there's already you boosting your score by 3 to 6 points. So.
Exactly. So I think it's something to look at. So like Mitch said, if he's the big dog down there, he's taking the kick-ins and he's waxing off half-back, then he's a guy that presents value.
And to me, just watching him the last couple of seasons, there was, I think we all picked him a few years ago. I had him 2 years ago where he really broke out. He was sort of like a league-winning pick.
Yeah.
But he's developed and improved really, really a lot as a decision maker, as someone who's kicking efficiency. I don't have the stats right in front of me to back that up, but just from the eye test, he looks more confident in his ability to have a bit more of a penetrating kick and make more use of it instead of just sort of bombing it down the line. I think he's very much improved in that, and if we can continue to see that happening at age 24, I think that he's a guy that they might want the ball in his hands a bit more and look for him a bit more. If he's going to be that unquestioned guy back there with Himmelberg moving forward.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the eye test there as well, Mitch, and we mentioned this in the previous pod. The eye test is something that I think is still has a place in fantasy.
I think so too.
Despite all the stats flying at us, especially with the new coach, if we're watching him and just seeing how he goes about getting his points, is he in favour with the coach and the game plan and those kind of things? I think that's key. So
I think the other player, just looking at the list here, I think the other player that I'm also watching in conjunction with him is Lachie Whitfield. And where is Lachie Whitfield playing? Is he playing on the wing and roaming the entire ground, or is he
year, isn't he
down back and switching a little bit with Himmelberg? They're obviously a very question mark heavy team, but I think Cumming could be one of those guys that potentially, if in 12 months' time we look back and he had a career best season, average 99 points this year, I wouldn't be 100% shocked. I wouldn't be.
It would be a hot take from you then, mate.
I don't know if I'm ballsy enough to go ahead and put it. I think I've got him at 94, 95 at the moment.
But it wouldn't shock you.
It wouldn't shock me if he's close to that 100 mark.
Yeah, I haven't heard too many people talking about him. So,
yeah, there you go. Yeah, have a look at him.
I will. Okay, is it my turn?
Yeah, let's throw it over to you. Who's your next guy?
All right. Now, this is a guy that there's quite a few people talking about, but I don't know whether Mitch will be high on this guy, and I also don't know how much value there is there. But this is James Sicily.
Okay.
From the Hawks. So
it's the first player that we're going to talk about that's not on my list.
Okay, yeah, and I thought that might be the case. So he's valued at 96.5. Just confirm that for us, Mitch.
Yeah,
96.5.
Check that one. I've got him. Yeah, 96.5.
Now, I was
854,000.
I was kind of like tossing up with this guy. Do I think there's a heap of upside? No. Do I think there's potential for some upside? Yes, so next year he'll be 2 years back off his ACL, and he showed last year that really coming back off that ACL wasn't a great deal of an issue for him. The thing that I think I've been hearing in the fantasy community as well is that Hawthorn are going to suck.
They're going to be trash. Yeah.
I think we all agree Hawthorn.
I don't think that's a bold take.
No, it's not. But it means that there's going to be ball for James Sicily down there. So. In addition to all the stuff he does with his mark kicks, he takes some kick-ins as well. There's a bloke that I wouldn't mind seeing get injured in the preseason, and that's that's Blake. Hey, let me justify it. That's
sicko.
That's Blake Hardwick, because he's stealing kick-outs, and I hate blokes that steal kick-outs. So Hardwick had 73 kick-outs last year, and Sicily had 69. So if he could maybe run and get the spare ball and get a few more kick-outs as well, that'd help his fantasy scoring too. He is a guy that I just like the way he goes about it. He's an interesting player. He'll be polarizing for some people because he is so intense. He does, on occasion, get white line fever. But those are the guys, from an AFL perspective, that you want in your team because they're first picked every week. You want those guys who bring a bit of grit and determination. And that comes out in his game style as well. He wants the ball in his hands across half back. He wants to set the boys up. So I think he presents value. I would say that he's going to average around the 100 mark this year. Right, so I think there's sort of like 4 to 5 points of upside there. But whether that's enough upside for you to pick him, that's for the listeners to decide.
I've got him. He's right in that mix for that sixth defender for me in terms of the top six. I think I've got him projected to basically do what he did last season, maybe a hair back at sort of 95 instead of 96 or 97.
Okay.
I'm wary of the young nature of this team. They've got a few up-and-coming players that might be getting it better as he's kind of stagnating. There's a lot of players in there that I do like. Jack Scrimshaw, Will Day, I think are players that I really like that I think deserve a bit more opportunity with the ball in their hands. You've got players like CJ coming in there who are also dynamic. There are actually a few decent young defenders in that Hawks backline, and I also think that Sicily is prone to sometimes playing a bit of a defensive role as well. He's not always that kind of player that roams free without having to worry about a man, and we like those guys for AFL Fantasy.
Do you think there's anyone at Hawthorn other than him that can do that? But like those guys you mentioned, do you think that they're going to be guys that Sam Mitchell goes to and says, hey, we want you to be the quarterback back there?
I think Scrimshaw and Will Day have that potential in them. Okay. Whether or not it's this season, I think, but I do think there is the potential in there for them to do that.
Okay.
Something that you can watch closely, and I just think that, he had that enormous game last season as well. I think it was the last game of the round, 151. I don't see him doing that much at all. I think that might artificially inflate his average just a little bit. He went absolutely bananas in that game, and it was against the Bulldogs.
I'd have to disagree. I think he has the potential to go big. Any guy that's a mark kick guy has the potential to do that. Wouldn't you agree? Like
he does, yes, he does. He's got the high ceiling, but he's also, I believe, he's got a low floor.
Yeah. Okay.
Just if he is playing a bit more of that lockdown defensive role, which he has done in the past.
Yeah.
He's 28 years old, so he's not breaking my over 30s rule. So that's
good. A hard and fast rule, everyone. By the way.
Yeah. We're sitting very hot on that one so far. But look, I think he's.
Is he a guy you'd be disappointed if you picked him? I'd put it that way. Let's say if you picked him, are you going to be disappointed by him this year?
There's room for it.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm not predicting him to fall away massively, but I think that there is a risk that he is playing a bit more of that defensive role.
Okay.
Whereas someone like an Isaac Cumming, there's no way he's a third tall defender that's going up and challenging some of those premium forwards. Whereas I think Sicily does have that potential to do that, depending on the mix of defenders that they're going to have in there. But
it'd be an interesting watch.
Yeah, it is an interesting watch because I know a lot of guys are keen on him, especially with the narrative of Hawthorn's going to suck. There's going to be plenty of ball back down there.
There's plenty of talk about it.
But they sucked last year. Let's be real.
What do you mean, Mitch?
They
were atrocious.
They weren't the best. So, but being one of their more senior players, maybe they do want the ball in his hands a little bit more.
Yep.
We'll have to wait and see and sort of watch the wording coming out of Hawthorn.
Yeah, for sure. We'll watch that closely. Okay, mates. You got the next one.
Let's go. Now, I'm going to break my own rule here.
Actually, I know who you're going to pick too.
The next player I'm going to talk about here is Aaron Hall.
This is so situational, isn't it?
This could be throwing a dart against a dartboard, aren't you?
But if we're talking about value, of course he presents value.
He's underpriced.
Yeah,
there's no denying he's underpriced.
Okay, I've cut you off. You keep going.
But can you pick him is the question. Now, if I just took out...
If you want a good night's sleep, the answer is no. You can't pick him.
Yeah, if you value sleep, you're not worried about Aaron Hall. But... there's no question that he presents value.
Yeah.
2 games last year, he was subbed out early due to injury. If you take out those 2 games, which you can do.
Yeah, I have heard that.
He averaged 103 points. That would put him second in the league for AFL fantasy defenders, behind Doherty, ahead of Dawson, ahead of Sinclair.
We are being flexible with the stats here.
I think what did he? 102.9. Okay. 102.9 versus 103.1 is what I've got.
Throw the stats at me.
But anyway, he's a guy that ultimately is the ceiling is there. He puts up stats. He can play junk time. He's a bit of a seagull back there.
Will his new coach allow him to be?
That's my concern. Number one, will the new coach tolerate that kind of behaviour? Number two, is his body going to hold up?
Yeah.
Number three, is he just going to decline a little bit because he's getting older? Like, if I go back to my rule, how old is he? 32?
He's 34.
Or 34.
So he's an old man.
So he's getting up there. So
yeah, I've got here just as a dot point, like he will average 100 plus if he plays every game and is uninjured.
Yeah,
like that, I think that's lock it in.
Yeah, and you're pretty hot on the defenders for North Melbourne in Clarko's system too. Like
it depends what system Clarko does choose to play, but historically, those guys who can wax off halfback and use the ball right are kind of preferred in his systems. There's too much risk, isn't there? And I think
there's too many question marks.
Mitch has presented him here, guys, but I think both of us are probably in that camp where we go like, yeah, he's value.
He's not in my team right now.
No, that's it. We have to acknowledge his value because, yeah, he is.
Yeah,
but we also, you just can't do it to yourself, could you? But it's the kind of move, like, let's put it this way. It's the kind of move that if you do it and it comes off, you could win the car. Like, do you know what I mean?
You could absolutely win the car. I think it's something that, you know, if we were to not talk about it, we'd be doing injustice to the player and his upside. So I think that it's something that we can. We've got to run through it and present the data as it is.
Exactly.
But between his body and his age and the question marks in his role, like there's talk about Taron Thomas playing a bit more off halfback. Luke McDonald's there as well, who's started to take a bit more kickings. He got dropped in round 23. Like he didn't make the team in the last round of the year.
There's so many question marks.
So he's not on the team's current timeline. They're probably not going to be prioritising him. So personally, I don't think you can start with him, all things considered, but. Yeah. Chances are he's going to come out in preseason, put a 140 on our heads, and we're all going to be thinking about it. And we're all going to be tempted. So I still think that he is someone that, we definitely should at least have a conversation about.
Yeah, you're right. And if anyone has big enough kahunas to pick him and wins the car, then I'll take my hat off to him because that's that would just be a great pick. But yet to be seen.
Yeah, and the other thing, some people shout out to the coaches panel guys. Their big thing is if you're tempted by an injury-prone player, you've got to start them because every game that goes past into the season, the likelihood they're going to get injured only increases. Yeah. I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to that logic, but
You're probably qualified to say that you're an exercise physiologist, so you know the body better than most.
Yeah, I think that. If you're fit and you're healthy, you're fit and you're healthy. Okay. I don't necessarily think that the more time goes, like I mean, it's all a bit up in the air.
Hamstrings are a bad one too. Like coming from personal experience, if you've got bad hamstrings, you've got bad hamstrings.
Yeah, so. It can be a tricky one that definitely rears its head. And the data would definitely suggest previous soft injury makes it more likely you're going to have another soft tissue injury. Let's move on to your next one here. Take us through. Who have you got?
Okay, I have a Swans backman that is I don't think there's much value there, but I think that there's the potential for value if he has one of his better seasons. So this guy breaks Mitch's rule as well. He's 32 years old, and I know that Mitch actually had him in his team last year, and it was a little bit of a roller coaster at points. So Jakey Lloyd is valued at 91.2, and he always feels like a guy. I don't know if you feel this way as well, Mitch, but he's a lock to be like a top 10 to 15 defender every year. If you pick him, you've got like a safe kind of 91, 92. You're not. He takes kickouts. He plays on every time. But is he a guy that you pick who can win you the car? If he has one of his better seasons this year, I think he can be a top 6 defender. So I think there's a little bit of value there for Jake Lloyd. He's shown in previous years that he can go over a ton. I think that he could have a season where he averages sort of like 95, 96. So that would be kind of 4 or 5 points of upside. Is he one that I'm going to be picking? I don't know if I'd feel good about it. Your thoughts, Mitch?
Yeah, I think, look, if you're going by seasons past, he's probably one of the premier defenders in the comp in terms of AFL Fantasy. 2020, he really blew up in those shortened quarters. If we play the adjusted average game, he was up there in 110. Year before that, 107, and another 100 in 2018 as well. So he's had runs on the board as that sort of uber number one premium defender in the comp. I think that the responsibility and the change in the aspirations of the Sydney Swans has affected a player like Lloyd. Yeah. When they're up and about, they're playing a bit more aggressive and fast-paced footy. He's someone that maybe falls away as a result of that. And also, the Lizard has also emerged last season and took a lot of his kick-in responsibilities. So I think he was down at 54%.
Yeah, that's
or thereabouts.
Stats on the kick-in. So 113 kickouts for Lloyd last year. There's only 6 times that he didn't play on, which is good for coaches.
He loves to play it on. Yeah,
he does love.
For sure.
But then, like you said, Blakey had 100 kick-ins, and guess how many times Blakey played on?
Was it 100%?
It was 100 times.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing that as well.
So he's still in some kickouts. Talk a little bit about your personal experience, because I know there was a little bit of a roller coaster with Lloyd. So there were like games where he would have a low score, he'd come out and put on 50 in the last quarter. So like talk about how that is. So
I got him in partway through last season because I thought there was potential for a bit of value. He was also kind of that guy that he was sort of the best that I could afford at the time, and I thought sort of he has...
You don't feel happy about those trades sometimes.
I didn't love the trade, and I know upon reflection, if I traded out another player, I could have got Ian Sinclair, but we won't talk about that. But he did come out. I think there was a few games. I had him for his big... I think his ceiling score was 150 or 140 or odd was his ceiling score in round 15, 141. But the week before, he put up 48 points. So roller coaster of emotions for me back then. But yeah, he definitely is someone that can save his score or really balloon his score in the final quarter if the game's in hand and they're chipping it around.
Yep.
But how often, again, if we refer back to that conversation with Tom Stewart, I don't love having a player that I'm relying on that to really get their scores.
Yep.
And, again, he's getting up there, 29 years of age, so I don't necessarily think we're going to see his best from him at age 29. So I think as a starting option, I'm probably fading him. I had him on my list with a little asterisk next to his name.
So he was
kind of on the borderline there, just because of the history. But I think that I'm not expecting the Jake Lloyd of old to come back with Sydney up and about and trying to push for finals and win the whole thing. I think that they want the ball. They've got a few other players that they can put the ball in their hands in now
good users
than they
as well.
did before. Yeah, so.
All right, you're up next. Who you got, mate?
All right, let's go in. There's a few other guys that I am really considering that we haven't talked about yet, and I'll leave maybe your boy for
you know who my last boy is.
I think I have an idea.
It's my last boy.
So I think I'm going to start here with Hayden Young of the Freo Dockers.
Well, you do like young players.
Oh, jeez, here we
I'm
go.
on fire today.
Okay, so Hayden
How
Young
do I only have 35 Twitter followers?
This is the kind of gear you missed out on, boys. But yeah, Hayden Young priced at... What is he priced at this year? Priced at... As I just scroll through my little notes here. Priced at 87.7, so nearly 776,000. Yep. He is 22 years of old, so young. And I think that he is emerging as the guy that they want the ball in the hands in at Freo. Before, in seasons past, that was a Luke Ryan.
Yep.
But if we look at after his buys and including the finals, Hayden Young averaged 92 after the buys, and if you include the finals that they were in as well, which is obviously more than 5 points higher than his price stat figure. So I think that there is a little bit of room to grow. How much is the question? Could he be that guy that busts out and goes close to 100 and they really just look for the ball? Because Freo does like that little bit of a chip.
Yeah, they do
chip it around a little bit.
I was just thinking that as well. But you mentioned Luke Ryan, and so Luke Ryan does do some waxing back there. But interestingly for Luke Ryan, he's never been a huge fantasy scorer, but I know that he does score really well in Supercoach.
Yeah, he's a bit better of a defensive presence. He's like we were talking about with Sicily before. He's that kind of guy that will guard a forward when required. Whereas Hayden Young, even though he is actually a good defender in pure defensive chat as well, but his value is more so that run and carry and designated kicker in my eyes. And I think that now that they've had a bit more experience going to the finals with Freo, and he's shown the ability to step up in those situations, I think that the team will be much more comfortable with letting him have a lot of the ball there. And I think that I've got him projected at about 92, 93, but again, he'd be one of those guys that it wouldn't surprise me if he takes a real step forward and goes high 90s, potentially even reaching that 100 mark.
So how many points of upside are you suggesting?
So he's at 97.5, 98. So there's probably only like 4 or 5 points that I can confidently lock in and say that I think he's got that upside.
87.5?
87.7 I think I've got here. So,
okay, yeah. So you said just over 90.
So right now, when I compare to another young player that we're going to talk about in a second, I probably have him on a back seat, but I am very much comparing him and the Daicos boy, which I'm sure you're going to bring up later.
And it's tough tough when you're being compared to Nick Daicos.
Yeah, and he is definitely in consideration with me in terms of that D2, D3 kind of spot, because I think that that age 22, that breakout year could really be around the corner. His price makes it a little bit hard, but prior to last season, he's only played 33 games of footy. Like he's not reached 50 games. He'll play 50 games if he's healthy this season. So
there's a notion as well in the AFL that once players get to that 50 games, that's kind of a point where they're feeling comfortable. They've got a bit of an eye for the level, and that can be a point where they really break out. So definitely a valid name on the undervalued list. I think there's a little bit of value there. Yeah,
I'm seriously, I think that he is someone that I'm seriously watching in the preseason and how much they want to use him, how much he's taking the kick-ins, because that's the other thing. Luke Ryan took a lot of those kick-ins. I think that there's a chance for that to switch as well. He's got a booming left foot, so I think that he's definitely someone that I see pretty serious upside in. So big preseason watch for me for Hayden Young.
Perfect. Should we talk about Mr. Daicos?
Let's do it. Is he your last one that you want to talk about, or have you got anyone else?
He's the last one that I had flagged here, and I think
last one on my list too.
Okay, well with Daicos, you've got a whole host of reasons why maybe you shouldn't pick him, and I reckon you've got a whole host of reasons why you should. Now, I'm in the should camp, but let me sort of present why there might be people out there who say that there's not as much value in Nick Daicos. So with what he did last year, I think we'd all agree that opposition coaches just started paying him more attention.
Yeah.
Now, what level of attention that is probably dictated by team, isn't it? We've got teams in the league that they just won't tag. They won't play a run with roll, and I mean, as fantasy coaches, we love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you also have coaches out there who will go, hey, we're going to clamp this bloke off halfback. Especially, I think, if he plays halfback, they'll look to clamp him. How much does that affect his scoring? We'll have to sort of wait and see. He got tagged a couple of times this year, but he'll certainly be better for that, if you know what I mean. Like he's going to have seen what does that look like now. But that's one of my points in the why not. He's going to get more attention. So even if coaches don't necessarily go with a specific tag to Daicos, he's going to be one of the players that is on the game footage.
He's on the game plan.
Do you know what I mean? He's on the game plan when you come to play Collingwood. So even if we don't say, hey, we're specifically going to tag Nick Daicos, there's going to be guys with their eyes on Nick Daicos.
You're looking for him. You're making sure, okay, I know where this guy is at all times because he's dangerous.
Yeah, and the last thing that I've got on the why not list is one that a couple of people have flagged as well. Is with Tom Mitchell coming in, we know Tom Mitchell's going to play in the midfield. Does that then take away some potential midfield time that everyone's kind of talking about for Daicos this year? So I don't necessarily think that one's too bad, because if he plays off halfback, I think he still racks it up as well.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just another little question mark is with Mitchell coming in. What are your thoughts?
He is a very interesting one, and I think he's going to be very popular. Yeah. So I think it's important with some of these really popular players to not just go with the crowd and go, oh, yeah, Nick Daicos, let's do it. He's young, he's value, or anything like that. Let's really critically analyse, like, is he actually value? How many times do these number one or number two picks, like in their second year, really blow up? And what are the reasons to why? So the thing, if I go into his 4 column, he's got a big ceiling, and he's already shown that so far. Had 147 as his career high against the Crows last year. Put up 40 disposals, 5 tackles, 3 marks, kicked 3 goals, which is pretty crazy in that game. So he can do a lot of it. He's not a massive tackler, which is something that I'm not sure if I really love. And also, he's got a bit of a low floor.
Okay, yeah.
He's a young player. So
no, he does, that's natural, isn't it? I don't have too many stats on throughout his junior career, but in the position that he's playing last year...
They were good. Let me put it that way.
Okay, yeah. In terms of tackling, I mean specifically. Like, his position last year really doesn't lend itself to tackling too much. He's playing outside. They want the ball in his hands. If he does go into the midfield, I'm interested to see what type of midfielder is he. Is he going to be an outside running midfielder, get the ball in his hands? Is he going to be a little bit of an inside midfield, a bit of both? So that will be interesting to see as well. But the other thing that I've got in the 4 column too, to build on what you were saying, is if you're a player at Collingwood, are you trying to get the ball to Nick Daicos?
Oh, 100%. You're looking for it.
Yeah. If you look, he's easily in the top 3 users at Collingwood, and he's in his second year. So that lends itself to fantasy scoring. And I also don't think Craig McRae's just going to let him get shut out of a game.
No, he's going to look after him.
Do you know what I mean? Like, let's say he's getting tagged. I just feel as though Fly's going to say, okay, let's try and get him in the middle. Let's try and...
let's switch it up and do a little bit.
It just
I
doesn't
think we already
strike me as
did
a
see
coach.
that a bit last year where she played a little bit forward as well, which, again, my ears pick up, and that's not the best for fantasy, but, he had that game where he kicked 3 goals, so he is effective in those things.
They're willing to try and shake the tag.
They're willing, So you could look at that 2 different ways and say, okay, does he not have a role or anything like that? Or you could look at it and they're looking after him and they want to make sure that he's involved in the game in some capacity. So,
and my last point I had in the fours column was the kid's just a gun.
Yeah. So. And you can't underestimate that. Yeah. He is just a gun. Yeah. I will throw some more stats out there. He averaged 90 after the bye with the ceiling of that 147, with an increase also to his kick-ins. So he was going at 64% after the buys versus 12% before the buys.
Yep.
And he played on 100% of the time.
Hey,
so
that's
what
boy.
we love. That's what we love. And I expect that trend to
and
continue. I think that he will be that 65-70% kick-in kind of guy if he is playing that halfback role, which I would have to lean towards him playing that role now more so than the centre bounce sort of midfielder.
Yeah.
Maybe doing a little bit in there, maybe like a 25-30%.
They'll kind of blood him in there, I think.
Maybe a little
There's
bit.
no doubt about that. But yeah, I would lean the same way as you.
Yeah, just with the Tom Mitchell inclusion. They've got a few other guys that can go in there. So to me, that kind of caps his ceiling a little bit. But right now, and I'm interested to see your thoughts. Like, I see him as sort of that mid to high 90s averaging player would be my guess. If he's gone at 90 after the bye in year 1, with a few tags in there as well, I think he'll learn from that and improve on that in that one. So to me, he's probably at least that low 90s guy bottom, and with the upside to maybe get to that low ton if everything falls right. So he's in that kind of range for me.
Yeah, I think I came out on the first pod and gave it the hot take.
Yeah, that's right. You said 100
plus, so I can't go back on my hot take. So, I mean, I think we'd all be ecstatic if he averaged over a ton.
If he averages a ton, he's a great first starting round selection.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that would put him in top 6 territory.
It all depends on how much time other teams put in. It's kind of that balance between, yes, he's going to have some improvement, but now other teams will put more time into him. So, just a great pick to watch either way. But yeah. Hoping he has a good season, eh?
Yeah, here's to that. Let us know what you guys think down in the comments below. Drop us down in the comments. Who do you think have we forgotten anyone? Do you disagree with any of our takes?
Remember, no one over 30 for Mitch as well. Just
do you think Aaron Hall is going to go 22 games this year? Who knows? Drop it down in the comments on YouTube if you're listening over there. Make sure you guys are subscribed. We're going to be pumping out talking overvalued defenders next. So a lot of players that maybe we didn't talk about today. We'll discuss why we think they're overvalued, and then also some mid-prices and our top 6 defenders we'll also talk about in our next couple of podcasts as well. So make sure you guys give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, and see you next time. Bye.